The sun had just begun to dip behind the moss-covered oaks of Cedar Falls, Georgia. It was a quiet, mostly white suburban neighborhood, where sidewalks were clean, mailboxes stood tall and straight, and suspicious eyes watched every unfamiliar movement. On Elmwood Avenue, the sound of tires crunching gravel broke the stillness. Danielle Brooks stepped out of a rented U-Haul van, sweat glistening on her forehead. She was 34, single, and proud of everything she had accomplished. After years of teaching high school history in Atlanta, after surviving an abusive marriage and climbing out of debt, this house, this one-story, red-brick home, was more than a mortgage. It was her miracle. She smiled as she looked at it. Her house. Her sanctuary. Her dream. "All right, baby," she whispered to herself. "Let's make this home." She walked to the back of the van and carefully pulled out a brand new 65-inch flat-screen TV, her one real splurge in this whole move. The box was almost as tall as she was, but she maneuvered it expertly, arms wrapped around it like a child. Across the street, an upstairs window's curtain fluttered. A pale, wrinkled hand held a cell phone to a weathered cheek. "Yes, I'd like to report a suspicious person, carrying a television. No, I've never seen them before. Black woman. Alone. Might be a break-in." Danielle struggled up the short steps to her front door, setting the box down gently to unlock it. She hadn't seen the curtain. She hadn't heard the 911 call. She hadn't noticed the patrol car roll up 2 blocks over, silent and dark. She was too busy unlocking her future. Inside, she cleared a space in the living room. She would need to get the mount set up soon. The excitement of a fresh start pulsed in her chest. She turned back to the door to grab more boxes, maybe the kitchen ones next. The moment she stepped outside again, her smile dropped. So did her heart. A police cruiser screeched up the curb, tires skidding against pavement. The door flew open. "Get your hands in the air! Now!" Danielle froze. Time fractured. A white police officer in tactical gear, bulletproof vest, dark sunglasses despite the dimming light, emerged with an assault rifle drawn. His hands were firm. His posture aggressive. His aim? Dead center on Danielle's chest. She could barely breathe. "What the hell?" she whispered, trembling. "I said hands up." He barked again, taking steps toward her, eyes locked on her face. "Step away from the door. Keep your hands where I can see them." She raised her hands slowly, unsure if she was about to die. Her mind raced. "I live here. I live here. What do I say? What do I do? Don't move. Don't argue. Don't look threatening. Just breathe, Danielle. Just breathe." I live here," she stammered, voice shaking. "This is my house. I just moved in today." The officer didn't budge. "You got ID on you?" His finger hovered over the trigger. "In the house," she said, voice cracking. Please, sir, I was moving my TV inside. I'm not doing anything wrong." He took another step closer. His gun didn't lower. "You fit the description of a burglary suspect reported moments ago. Don't move." Tears welled in Danielle's eyes. Her body trembled. Her voice caught in her throat. Behind her, the box with the TV sat on the front steps, still unopened. Neighbors had begun to peek from behind curtains, phones already recording. But no one came outside. No one said, "She lives here." No one said, "Stop." No one said anything at all. Danielle's arms burned from being held in the air. Her pride burned deeper. "I'm a teacher," she whispered. "I teach kids. I bought this house with my own damn money. I need you to get down on your knees," the officer said, as if her words didn't matter at all. "Do it now." And just like that, a woman who had fought her whole life to stand tall was ordered to kneel on her front porch like a criminal. The cold of the concrete seeped through Danielle's jeans as she slowly lowered herself onto her knees. She was careful, every motion exaggerated, robotic, terrified that the wrong move might cost her life. Her hands were still high in the air, trembling as the officer circled her like a predator. His assault rifle never moved an inch off its target. I said face down. Hands behind your head. He barked again, the barrel of his gun now just a few feet away. Danielle hesitated. Face down? On my own porch? But she didn't argue. She couldn't afford to. One twitch, one misread gesture, and she might never stand up again. Her palms touched the rough cement, then her chest, her cheek. The surface was hot from the lingering sun, but the warmth felt cruel, almost mocking. The same porch she had dreamed of sipping sweet tea on, the same doorstep she had proudly crossed hours ago, now felt like a crime scene. Her crime? Being black with a box in her hands. Her voice shook. Please, please call someone. My realtor. My neighbor. I have paperwork inside. This is my house. Ma'am, stop talking. His voice was cold steel. From the side, Danielle caught a glimpse of another cruiser pulling up. A second officer, white and much younger, jumped out with handcuffs already in hand. She closed her eyes. This can't be happening. This can't be happening. My name is Danielle Brooks. I'm 34. I pay taxes. I teach history. I vote. I volunteer. I follow the law. I have done everything right. And I'm still here, face down like a criminal. The second officer approached, his boots echoing on the walkway. Without a word, he kneeled beside her and yanked her arms back. The handcuffs clicked tight around her wrists. Her heart pounded against the cement. Suspect is in custody, the first officer said into his radio. Suspect. That word echoed in Danielle's mind like a scream. Not homeowner. Not woman. Not citizen. Not human. Suspect. She felt the pull as they lifted her to her feet, one on each arm. The world spun for a moment, and the edge of the porch scraped her shin. She winced but didn't cry out. She wouldn't give them that. Where's your ID? The younger one asked gruffly. In the kitchen, she replied, her voice hollow. In my purse. On the counter. We'll verify. Until then, you're being detained for possible burglary. I live here. They didn't answer. As the two officers led her toward the squad car, Danielle glanced around. More neighbors were watching now. Curtains pulled wide. Phones in hand. Nobody speaking. Except for one voice. Is everything okay over there, officer? An older white man shouted from his porch across the street. Just responding to a call, sir. Possible burglary in progress. Ah, the man said, nodding. Looks like you caught her in the act. Danielle's jaw clenched. She wanted to scream. She wanted to fight. But she knew what happened to black women who raised their voices while wearing cuffs. So she kept walking. Silent. Humiliated. Boiling on the inside. They shoved her into the back of the cruiser. The interior was suffocating, too hot, the plastic seat unforgiving. No one had read her rights. No one had even asked her name. She sat there, trying to breathe, wrists digging into metal, eyes darting to the mirror as the officer returned from her house. She's got mail and they're addressed to a Danielle Brooks. Matches her description. So? Let's check it against DMV records. 10 minutes passed. 15. Danielle's chest heaved. Her throat ached. Sweat collected on her brow. She could hear them laughing outside, not maliciously, but casually, like this was just another boring Tuesday. She had taught her students about Emmett Till. About Rosa Parks. About Rodney King. She had shown them documentaries, led discussions, held hands when the tears came. She had believed in progress. Believed in change. And now, here she was. Cuffed. Trapped. And alone. The door finally opened, and Officer Mercer, the one with the assault rifle, leaned in. We're letting you go. But I suggest you don't carry big-screen TVs around without proof of residence in neighborhoods like this. It confuses people. Danielle stared at him in disbelief. No apology. No explanation. Just a warning. She was uncuffed without ceremony. Her wrists burned. Her dignity was shattered. I want your badge number, she said, trying to steady her voice. Mercer looked at her, smirked, and said nothing. The younger officer offered a number, but too quickly for her to write it down. The cruiser sped off. And Danielle stood there, alone in her yard, arms wrapped around herself. The neighbors were still watching. One of them raised their phone and snapped a photo. She went back inside without a word. The TV was still sitting on the porch. Danielle sat motionless at the kitchen table, her hands still shaking from the pressure of the cuffs. The silence in the house screamed louder than the sirens that had vanished 20 minutes ago. The television box remained on the porch like an accusation, half shadowed by the setting sun. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister. Everything okay? Heard sirens near your street. She stared at it for a full minute before typing back. They cuffed me. Thought I was robbing my own house. There were no words exchanged after that. Just a typing bubble that blinked and disappeared. Danielle stood, her legs weak, and walked to the bathroom. She stared at herself in the mirror. Her eyes were red. Her wrists were bruised. Her lips trembled. But her spine was steel now. She picked up her phone again, opened the camera, and hit record. My name is Danielle Brooks. I'm a middle school teacher. I live in Willow Creek, a quiet suburb just outside Atlanta. This is my new home. I moved in yesterday. Today, I was putting a TV in my living room when I was held at gunpoint by police officers who assumed I was stealing. Because I'm black. Her voice cracked slightly but didn't break. They never asked for my name. They never asked for ID. They told me to lie face down on my porch. They handcuffed me like a criminal. All because a neighbor called 911 and said a suspicious person was carrying a box. She raised her arm to show the red marks around her wrists. This is what it means to be black in America in 2025. You can work hard, buy a house, follow every law, and still be seen as a threat in your own neighborhood. She hit stop. The video was raw, imperfect, and real. She didn't hesitate. She uploaded it to Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. It exploded. Within hours, the video was shared over 50,000 times. Local news picked it up. National reporters began calling. Friends, students, strangers, all left messages of support, outrage, and disbelief. #Justice for Danielle began trending by midnight. But not all the responses were supportive. Comment sections flooded with familiar bile. Maybe she looked suspicious. Why didn't she just show ID right away? Stop making everything about race. I bet she exaggerated the whole thing. Danielle didn't sleep that night. Her phone buzzed nonstop. Some messages were threats. Some were prayers. Some were reporters from CNN and MSNBC. By morning, she was on Good Morning America via video call. Her face appeared on national TV, calm but fierce. She recounted the story, holding nothing back. Back in Willow Creek, Officer Mercer watched the interview in the precinct break room, his jaw tight, his knuckles white. She wants to make me the poster boy for racism, he muttered. You did aim a gun at her, another officer said flatly. Mercer turned. She looked suspicious. I got a call about a burglary in progress. I followed protocol. Maybe, the younger cop shrugged. But the optics, you might be in trouble, man. Danielle's story wasn't going away. By that afternoon, the mayor of Willow Creek released a public statement calling the incident deeply disturbing and promising an investigation. The police department issued a half-hearted press release claiming the officers were responding to a call and acting with caution. That night, Danielle couldn't bring herself to unpack any more boxes. Instead, she sat at her laptop and wrote. She wrote about fear. About pride. About having her dignity stripped on the front steps of her own home. She wrote about history, the ghosts of Jim Crow, the lies of post-racial America, the pain of always being seen as a threat. She hit publish on an op-ed for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution titled, "The House I Own, the Skin I'm In." By the next morning, her inbox had offers from publishers. Civil rights lawyers reached out. Celebrities reposted her video. Students made signs. Teachers at her school organized a silent protest. But somewhere in the shadows of her eyes, something darker stirred. Because Officer Mercer wasn't planning to sit back and let his career be torn apart. And Danielle had no idea just how far some people would go to silence the truth. Danielle's phone hadn't stopped ringing for 3 straight days. Her story had ignited a national firestorm. Interviews, requests for speeches, podcast invitations. Her inbox became a battlefield of love and hate. She never imagined that a simple Sunday afternoon would thrust her into the epicenter of America's racial reckoning. But while millions embraced her truth, there were others who saw her as a threat. And they were organizing. It began with a headline from a local right-wing blog. Race-baiting teacher cries wolf, was it all a setup? Danielle stared at the article, stunned. They had published photos of her from social media, out of context. One from a protest march in 2020, captioned, BLM agitator with a history of anti-police rhetoric. Another of her holding a glass of wine at a friend's birthday, twisted into, teacher caught partying days before incident. She tried to shrug it off, but it was just the beginning. Officer Mercer had broken his silence. Standing on the steps of the Willow Creek Police Department, flanked by 2 attorneys and surrounded by microphones, Mercer wore his uniform like armor. I did what I was trained to do, he said firmly. I received a dispatch call reporting a possible break-in. I approached with caution. The individual did not comply with verbal instructions immediately, and for the safety of myself and others, I had to take control of the situation. This has nothing to do with race. It's about procedure and safety. He paused for dramatic effect. I'm being targeted because I'm white and because I wear this badge. The crowd murmured. The reporters jotted furiously. Within hours, his statement had been clipped and spun across news cycles. Suddenly, he was the victim. Fox News ran a segment titled, Cop Under Siege, The War on Police Continues. Danielle watched in disbelief as commentators dismissed her trauma, questioned her motives, even accused her of orchestrating the entire event for clout. She wanted to go viral. One anchor sneered. This is Jussie Smollett all over again. She turned off the TV and sat in silence. That night, someone threw a rock through her living room window. Shards scattered across her floor like broken promises. The rock had a note taped to it. Liar. Race hustler. Get out. The police came. They took a statement. They promised to investigate, but this time, they didn't even send a detective. Just 2 tired officers who barely glanced at the note. Danielle felt her voice tightening in her throat. The same system that tried to erase her humanity now stood indifferent as others tried to silence her completely. The next morning, she walked into her classroom to find her students buzzing. Miss Brooks, you're on TikTok. My mom said you're like Rosa Parks. But their innocence was a double-edged sword. The school district had already called her in. Danielle, the superintendent began, folding his hands. We're proud of your courage. But the attention, it's disrupting classes. Parents are concerned. Some are questioning your judgment. We need to consider a temporary leave of absence. A leave? She asked, stunned. For what? For surviving? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. They handed her paperwork. She walked out with her head high, but her soul heavy. Meanwhile, Mercer's version of events gained traction. His lawyers leaked partial body cam footage, conveniently starting after the gun had been lowered and omitting the aggressive approach. In the edited clip, Danielle's voice was shaky, her emotions raw. Commentators called her hysterical. They picked her apart frame by frame. She didn't say she lived there until 30 seconds in. Why didn't she have the deed in her hand? Why was she so emotional if she had nothing to hide? Her truth was being twisted. Danielle turned to civil rights attorney Alana Graves, a fierce black woman with decades of courtroom experience. They're gaslighting the world, Danielle said. Graves nodded. Let them try. We'll sue the department. We'll sue the city. But more importantly, we'll put the truth on record. In a court of law. The lawsuit was filed 2 days later, Brooks vs. Willow Creek PD, citing unlawful detainment, racial profiling, emotional trauma, and negligence. The press exploded again. Mercer doubled down. The mayor tried to straddle the fence. The police chief went silent. And as the legal battle loomed, Danielle felt her world spinning, not because she feared the fight ahead, but because she realized the depth of the war she had stumbled into. She wasn't just challenging a single cop. She was challenging the system that made him feel entitled to pull a gun on a woman for carrying a TV. And that system was ready to defend itself with every dirty trick in the book. The courthouse in Fulton County was an old stone beast, gray, cold, and indifferent. As Danielle walked up its steps, flanked by attorney Alana Graves and 2 young paralegals, the weight of history pressed against her chest. This was where lives were either shattered or vindicated. And she knew the odds. Inside, Officer Mercer sat stiff-backed at the defendant's table, his eyes fixed forward. His legal team was a well-funded machine, paid for in part by the police unions. Officer Defense Fund, a pool of money that had saved more than a few reputations in its time. His suit was navy, his hair trimmed with military precision, and his face wore a practiced solemnity. Danielle sat directly across from him. Their eyes met only once, and in that instant, something passed between them. Not guilt. Not fear. But something colder, calculation. Judge Beasley entered, a black woman with decades on the bench and no patience for theatrics. She commanded silence with a glance and opened proceedings with sharp efficiency. The first week was a slow burn of procedural motions and bureaucratic sparring. The defense tried to dismiss the case entirely, citing qualified immunity. But Graves was ready. Immunity doesn't mean impunity, she snapped. We will prove this officer did not act with reasonable cause. He acted on bias. And that bias could have killed my client. The judge allowed the case to proceed. The courtroom filled with journalists, legal interns, and curious citizens. Outside, protesters stood with signs. Justice for Danielle, we believe black women, reform Willow Creek PD. And on the other side of the street, a thinner line of blue flag-waving counter-protesters. One man wore a shirt that read, "She lied. Cops died." Even though no one had died. Day 5 brought the first bombshell. Graves called Officer Mercer to the stand. What was the nature of the 911 call you responded to? She asked. Mercer cleared his throat. Caller reported a suspicious person, a potential burglary. Did the caller mention race? Yes. Describe the suspect as a black female. Graves nodded. And did you make any effort to confirm the woman's identity before drawing your weapon? Mercer hesitated. Ma'am, in situations like this. Please answer the question. No. I did not. Thank you. The courtroom buzzed. Next, Graves unveiled internal records she had subpoenaed from the Willow Creek PD. Dozens of arrest reports, stop and frisks, and incident logs, all with one disturbing pattern. Black residents were disproportionately detained, questioned, and searched by a handful of repeat officers. At the center of many of those reports? Officer Mercer. A retired dispatcher testified, reluctantly, that Mercer often referred to certain neighborhoods as war zones. Once, in an unguarded moment, he'd reportedly joked, "If they're brown and carrying something, assume it's stolen." The defense squirmed. But their response was brutal. They brought up Danielle's social media again. A post from 2 years earlier where she called the justice system a rigged plantation. A retweet of a controversial activist's speech. Photos from marches, protests, and book clubs, all painted as proof of her anti-police bias. Isn't it true? The defense attorney smirked. That you've never trusted law enforcement? Danielle sat tall. It's not about trust. It's about experience. Answer the question. I don't blindly trust any system that treats people like me as guilty before proven innocent. The courtroom crackled with tension. Then came the surveillance footage. Grainy, taken from a neighbor's Ring camera across the street, but clear enough. It showed Danielle stepping out of her car, picking up the TV box, walking calmly to the porch. Moments later, 2 police cruisers pull up fast. Officers jump out. Guns drawn. Danielle drops the box, her hands raised. It was impossible to spin. Still, Mercer's team tried. He feared for his safety. They insisted. The box could have concealed a weapon. Her refusal to comply instantly heightened the threat level. She was carrying a TV! Graves shouted. Is that the new standard for lethal force? Judge Beasley had to call for order 3 times that day. But then, something unexpected happened. A former officer from Willow Creek reached out, anonymously at first. His name was Elias Turner. Retired 2 years ago. After much pressure, he agreed to testify, under protection. He told the jury what many feared: racial bias was embedded in the culture of that precinct. Mercer wasn't alone, Turner said. We were trained to see black bodies as dangerous by default. It wasn't in the manuals. It was in the jokes. In the looks. In who we were told to watch. And who we were told to let slide. Why are you coming forward now? Graves asked. Turner's voice cracked. Because Danielle could have died. And if we don't change, someone else will. The courtroom went silent. Danielle felt tears building, not just from the weight of validation, but from the sheer cost of getting there. After the session, Graves pulled her aside. We're making progress. But this isn't just about the trial anymore. It's bigger. And that means more eyes and more threats. She wasn't wrong. That night, Danielle received an anonymous email. Back down or you'll wish you had. Attached was a photo of her house. Her mother's address. Even her school's location. Graves called the FBI. Security was increased. But the threat was clear: someone wanted her silent. Danielle sat on her porch again, the same porch where it all began, and stared into the dark. The bruises were gone, but the fear remained. Not of losing a case, but of losing herself in a war she never asked for. And still, she would not bend. Because somewhere, a young black girl was watching. And that girl needed to see that survival wasn't enough. You had to fight back. The courthouse air was heavier than usual that morning, a silence that clung to every breath, every cough, every footstep. People came early, standing in line to witness what many called the trial of the year. Inside, cameras were banned, but every bench was filled. Reporters scribbled. Protesters chanted just outside. Danielle sat with her attorney, Alana Graves, her fingers clutched tightly around a pen she hadn't once used. It had all come to this. 6 weeks of testimony. Dozens of witnesses. Hundreds of documents. And one woman who'd stood when every force in her world told her to fall. But just when the closing arguments were expected to begin, Graves received a manila envelope from the court clerk. It had been filed at 6:14 a.m. that very morning. It came with a note. From a protected source. Relevant to discovery. Judge approved. Inside the envelope, photos. Dozens. All time-stamped, geotagged. All showing Officer Mercer, off-duty, in uniform, at various, questionable, engagements. Parties. Bars. A gun range, with a cardboard cutout of a hoodie-wearing target labeled Thug. In one image, he stood next to a Confederate flag, beer in hand, grinning. Another photo showed a group chat screenshot from a private app used by off-duty officers, filled with racial slurs and violent jokes about civilians. One post read, "Better to draw first and ask questions later. Especially in the hood." It was his account. His phone. His name. Graves' hands trembled slightly. This changes everything. She immediately requested an emergency filing to admit the materials. The defense screamed about unfair surprise. But the judge reviewed the images in chambers and allowed them in. It speaks directly to character and credibility, Judge Beasley said, with a look that could slice steel. Mercer was recalled to the stand. This your profile? Graves asked. Mercer, clearly rattled, stared at the screen. It was a private chat. Off duty. Did you write this? I don't recall. Graves zoomed in. Is that your phone number at the top? Silence. Is that your face next to the flag? Silence. Danielle didn't blink. The jury, however, shifted. One woman leaned forward, her eyes locked on Mercer like she was seeing a stranger unmasked. The defense tried to spin it as dark humor, locker room talk. Inappropriate, yes, they said. But not criminal. Graves' rebuttal was calm. Cutting. This isn't about humor. This is about mindset. About the lens through which a man with a badge viewed people like my client. You saw the video. You heard the dispatcher. You saw the patterns. And now you've seen what he really believes. That night, Danielle didn't sleep. Her mom prayed quietly in the living room. The security detail paced the lawn. It felt like the longest storm of her life had paused, just long enough to whisper, "Get ready." Verdict day. Rain tapped the courthouse windows like a ticking clock. The jury returned after 12 hours. Danielle sat between her mother and Alana. She couldn't feel her fingers. All rise. The foreman, a middle-aged man with gray stubble and tired eyes, stood holding a white envelope. The judge nodded. Has the jury reached a unanimous verdict? We have, Your Honor. He handed the paper to the bailiff. The clerk read aloud. On the charge of unlawful use of deadly force, we find the defendant, Officer Tyler Mercer, guilty. Gasps. Then cheers from the back of the room. Danielle's mother clutched her chest, sobbing quietly. Graves placed a firm hand on Danielle's shoulder. But there was more. On the charge of civil rights violation under color of law. Guilty. On the charge of perjury. Guilty. On the charge of attempted coercion during internal affairs investigation. Guilty. 4 counts. 4 convictions. Mercer sat motionless. His lawyer whispered something urgent, but his eyes were locked on the table. A man who once believed the badge made him untouchable, now knew better. Sentencing was scheduled for 60 days later. He faced up to 20 years. Outside, the press erupted. Graves held a brief statement. Today is not just about one woman. It's about all those who didn't get cameras, didn't get justice. This is a step forward. One of many we still must take. Danielle didn't speak to the press. She walked past them quietly, hand in her mother's, and disappeared into a waiting car. 2 months later, Officer Mercer was sentenced to 17 years. Danielle returned to her classroom 2 weeks later. The kids greeted her with hugs, notes, and wide eyes. Miss N, you beat the bad guy, one student said, his voice innocent and wide with belief. She smiled. No, baby. We just told the truth. That's stronger than any punch. Later that year, she received a letter from Congresswoman Ebony Sinclair, inviting her to Washington to speak at a hearing on national police reform. She declined. Instead, she helped organize a local initiative in Georgia, Community Watchdogs, where citizens monitored and reported local law enforcement behavior. A few retired officers joined. A few younger ones too. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. 2 years later, Danielle stood on the same porch where it all began. The TV was long gone. The scars had faded. But every crack in the wood still whispered the story. A young girl from down the block, Kira, rode up on her bike. Miss Danielle, she called. My mama said you're the reason we got cameras now on every cop car. Danielle chuckled. Your mama gives me too much credit. Wanna see my speech? I wrote one. For school. About heroes. Danielle paused. You sure you want to use that word for me? Kira tilted her head. You stood up when they wanted you quiet. You changed things. That's what heroes do. Danielle looked out toward the street, where a police cruiser now drove slowly by, its camera light blinking. Where a sign stood on the corner. Willow Creek, a community watched by its people. She smiled. Not proud. Not finished. But steady. Yes, Kira, she finally said. I'd love to hear your speech,